This is the E-commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Mr. Russ Hawkins from Agilence, welcome to the podcast, my friend. You're dialing in from the great state of Massachusetts, right?
That's correct, Jason. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
My absolute pleasure to have you along for the ride with me today. And before we get into what Agilence is and does, why don't you walk me through? You've been doing this for a long time over at Agilence. You've been running this company for nearly 20 years now. But what drew you into this industry of? I would broadly put you in the bucket of omni-channel loss prevention and governance. But tell me, this seems like such a tight little niche, a little specialization, like a deep specialization. How did you even decide that this was an industry that you wanted to become a leader in?
Well, a lot of it has to do with how I have managed my career. So I started out actually in the telecom business back in the day. You can tell by my gray hair that I've been around for a while.
But you still got your hair, and that's a good thing.
Well, it's a good, this angle is pretty good. If I lean down a little bit, you can see a few bald spots. But yeah, I'm a little bit of a silver fox, as people have said anyway. And anyway, I spent many years in the telecom industry, technology business, and then during the turn of the century, actually, I got recruited out of there to be the CEO of a small startup company. First one that I did, these are venture backed startup companies. First one I did was a hardware based business that we built up and then sold. That led to recruitment into another company, which was a high performance computing company. And most of my background was based on hardware and was very interested in the software business. I'm a believer that, as I think it's Mark Andreessen says, that the software will eat the world. And I got friendly with a venture capitalist that had funded Agilence and needed a new CEO to come in and basically provide adult supervision. So the driver for me was to get into a software business. And in fact, today, even though a large part of what we do is loss prevention focused and fraud detection focused, I tend to think of what we do as much broader. I think of total retail fraud, and we also do business with restaurant chains and with hotels and supermarkets. And a lot of what we do is about operational effectiveness. It's about managing or corralling the data that is being generated by these companies and making it available to people to make better decisions. And while a large part of what we do is around loss prevention and cost and expense control, we do things in the revenue enhancement and in the compliance areas. So yeah, the loss prevention part is a little bit of a niche, but what I've found is that managing data and thinking about how to optimize operations is a much broader palette to work from. And we do things, and we're increasingly doing more and more things in all of those areas as we grow the business.
And I love the tagline that I've seen you guys use, which is shrinkage is everywhere. And for those that maybe don't work in the industry and maybe haven't had to think about omni-channel inventory management and stock placement and fraud prevention and even just misplacement of inventory. In the very, very many years ago when I was straight out of high school, one of my first jobs, I was working in the Big Five sporting goods chain. And in the back of these stores, we had these storerooms with pallet racking all the way to the ceiling. And sometimes our point of sale system would say we have something in stock, and we would go back there in the back and we would go, no, we don't. It was stuck in some corner somewhere in a box that was mislabeled or something like that. Although in theory, we may have had this SKU in stock. If you can't find it, you may as well not have it in stock. And so I feel like what you guys provide to industry is, I think of it almost broadly like inventory intelligence. And I think of this beyond just, okay, cool, did somebody stick something down their pants and walk out the door with it, steal it from us? But there are so many chances along the entire supply chain from manufacturer to distribution to stores and every place in between. It feels like inventory can go missing through a myriad of reasons, even if there's no malice associated with that inventory going missing. It just seems to be a real challenge for especially at scale businesses to understand where all their inventory is at all times? It just seems like a hard thing to
It
do.
is an incredibly hard thing to do. We have some war stories that I could share with you about a very large dollar store type of operation that had more than $700 million worth of material that was close to expiration dates sitting in a warehouse, and they were unaware of it. So in this case, it's simply a matter of moving the material at the right time out through the distribution channels into the stores. But they were completely unaware that this stuff was nearing expiration. But you're absolutely right. Shrink is all about the difference between what you think you have and what you actually have, right? And what the delta between those things is called shrink. Shrink can happen lots of places, all the ones that you talked about. But quite frankly, a lot of it happens at the point of sale, and a lot of that happens, especially in an e-commerce world. A lot of it happens at that transaction level where people either first order good people are interacting with the e-com website, or people with bad intent doing it. There's all kinds of ways for it to happen. You mentioned some of them just not knowing what's where and how did it get there. There's all kinds of technologies out there that are being used, and it's evolving dramatically. There's lots of software companies that are trying to solve the problem, but it's still a mess. I got to tell you, it's still a total mess. And that's one of the main areas that we're focused on. Excuse me. We also focus a
And
lot on the transaction end, the interaction, whether it's in bricks and mortar environment or on an e-com environment. How does that retailer get the value for the product and deliver the product? And there's all kinds of ways that can get messed up, and all kinds of ways that people with bad intent, some of them are employees and some of them are third party. And today now there's some of them are just virtual people. AI generated bots creating fake IDs and fake accounts and funneling everything to the same physical address. There's a million things that are happening, and it's a war. It's an arms race. Vendors and companies build new capabilities to address certain issues, and then both fraudsters, whether they're internal or external, learn new ways of defeating those things, and it just works its way up. It's climbing a ladder of fraud detection and resolution.
what's wild to me is that this is still a challenge for retailers, distributors, manufacturers. This is still a problem and a challenge even in 2025. Now, I remember, and you'll know this better than me because you live in this world, but I remember even as early as a decade ago that we started hearing terms like Internet of Things. We started to hear terms like digital twins. We even started to see custom supply chain software and digital twin software being supplied by the likes of Google and Oracle and the biggest tech companies in the world. And yet, we still, despite all that, and the vision was, hey, we should have a digital twin of every single unit, of every single item, from the point of manufacture to the time it leaves that warehouse to the time it ends up in some sort of end customer's hands. We saw during COVID the rise of QR codes as a really viable and modern replacement of barcoding. We started to see distribution and RFID dots becoming a really big thing, and the cost of RFID tagging come down substantially, even down to some of the tracking devices and some of the scanning devices, rooftop scanning devices, doorway scanning devices, etc. We saw this technology, what in beacons and everything else. I felt like this problem was going to start really truly being solved like a decade ago, but it still feels like it is. And it's like that thing, you overestimate what you can do in a year, but you underestimate what you can do in 10.
Right.
But it feels like there is still this challenge, and I almost think of it as like the EDI industry. EDI has been around for 60 plus years. There's multiple different versions and formats of EDI globally. It's still the backbone of wholesale distribution, whether we like it or not. And so AI is slowly starting to encroach into the EDI space with agentic procurement and punch out, et cetera. But EDI hasn't gone anywhere in 60 years. And I still feel like some of the old traditional ways of tracking an item from manufacturer to distribution, being a swing tag and a barcode, It feels like that is still the global standard, whether we like it or not.
It is, and I mean, there's obviously it depends on the company we're talking about. So there's a wide array of businesses out there that are in the retail industry. They're financed in all kinds of different ways. They have all kinds of different levels of intellectual property, and they have all kinds of different levels of IT support. The basic merchant just wants to buy low and sell high, right,
Yeah.
and benefit from the balance. But to implement these systems is very complex and requires a significant investment and requires a significant amount of expertise, usually, and training and ongoing management. And then 6 months later, some new variation comes around that requires it all to be done again. And there's all these gaps that are created in the technology deployment that fraudsters exploit. Speaking about e-commerce in particular, the same thing that makes e-commerce so powerful for retailers, the speed, the convenience, the global reach, it makes it a playground for people that want to be fraudsters, right? Because they can sit somewhere remotely, they can be outside the country, they can be today using bots and AI to create the impression that there's many endpoints of this stuff, and it's hard to plan for those kinds of things. It's hard for systems to accommodate this evolving, changing landscape of fraudsters and systems that are used internally to track these things. So it does require, like most things, frankly, in business, it requires a constant intention, a constant evolution, a constant upgrading of technologies. And every time that happens, there's a new learning curve that both people need to get into. Both the bad guys and the good guys have to get into, and it's not ever going to end, in my opinion. The technologies will change, the tools will change, but people are smart. There's a lot of smart people out there. There's a lot of people out there that they don't want to work for a living. They want to, or they're working hard for a living, but they enjoy gaming the system rather than living within the system.
And do you think of your role as a broader sort of supply chain security roles, a supply chain governance, a supply chain intelligence? Do you feel that, because obviously you're not just looking at situations like someone stuffing something, putting 3 t-shirts on and then putting a jacket over that and walking out the store and ripping the swing tags off before they walk out the door in a changing room, for example. You're going so far beyond this. Do you come in, and obviously you've got a platform, you've got a technology, you've got a capability that these companies can implement, but do you find that you are oftentimes tasked with being broader supply chain security consultants, especially upfront? Are you really helping these businesses identify gaps in everything supply chain between a product being made and it getting into a customer's hand? It feels like you carry a lot of weight on your shoulders with the clients you work with. Let's put it that way.
No question about it. Our business is concentrated more on the endpoint, on the delivery, that interface, whether it's the cash register in the store or the website. It's in that interface where the company meets the customer, where that happens. A large part of what we do is around that. We do some of the work on tracking inventory from distribution centers and into the retail environment. And we're planning on doing more in that area. I wouldn't say that I think we're consultants across the board, but I wouldn't say that our expertise is dominated by supply chain. I think it's more dominated by movement from the distribution center out to the customer, and whether that is, as I say, through bricks and mortar or through e-com.
And when we start thinking about the technology that you guys have developed, how does that then plug into these operational point of sale systems, whether it's ecom, whether it's EDI, punch out in wholesale, whether it's retail and within POS systems? Are you connecting to ERPs? Are you connecting to point of sale systems? Are you connecting to e-commerce platforms? Where is, I guess, the vector where you start to come into play operationally inside these businesses?
Yeah, so the short answer to that question is yes on all of those things. So where we sit is, at least we think of it as the center from a data aggregation standpoint. There are lots of companies that are doing data management, and many of these companies are very sophisticated. They have very sophisticated tools, and they require a significant amount of expertise to operate them. What we're trying to do is to democratize access to those kinds of things. We create in the cloud, so we're SaaS based. We create in the
Yep.
cloud a database, and Typically, that database starts with the bricks and mortar transaction log. So that's a record of everything that's transpired at the cash registers across the chain. My average customer today has 750 locations, and I've got about 160 of them, and they range from low end of about 40 to the high end of about 16,000 locations.
Wow.
And we get a feed from the POS channel, usually on a daily basis, but some of them give it to us as quickly as every 10 minutes or so. We get a feed from the ecom transaction log as well. So we have data on all of the material that's flowing through there. We get the customer loyalty files, so we know who are the kind of official relationships with the customer. We get the human resources files, so we know everybody that works in the enterprise. The locations, and it could be multiple websites, but on a bricks and mortar, it's all of the physical locations, where are they located. Usually there's some additional information in there about maybe product mix or setting, maybe it's a mall or a standalone store. And then finally we get the item file, so we know everything that is being sold, or at least our software knows everything that is being sold, what their identification number is, usually other information like its price, its cost, maybe its promotional price, and those kinds of things. So all of that stuff comes together into a database. We harmonize it so that it is easy for our application to be able to mix and match data from various sources. We add breadth and depth to the database as well. So that is, we add mathematical and statistical and Boolean operators to create additional numbers, basically, that are a combination of the data with these mathematical operators put on top of them. That deepens and broadens the database. And then we give our customers a way, and this is the key part, without having to be a data scientist, without having to be an IT person, to be able to essentially do it on a natural language basis. We're not quite there yet with the just speak to it, where we're in a mode where it's a written query engine, but we give them the ability to ask questions of the resulting database. And as I mentioned originally, we're primarily dealing with loss prevention people and asset protection people. So most of the large organizations out there have a professional organization that does these kinds of things. But increasingly, what's happening for us is that once we get implemented in a company, other people become aware of the power of our application, and they have other questions that they want to have answered. So it might be about the promotion effectiveness, which is another way of having losses, right? If you're running a promotion, and if it's in a restaurant environment, maybe a limited time offer, or it's a buy one, get one in a store, or something along those lines. If that promotion, some marketing person back in headquarters decided that we're going to do this promotion and here's what the results are going to be. Now, it may be weeks or months before they actually know what the results are. We'd like to shorten that down to a day, right? We can tell you tomorrow whether you're getting the upsell that you expected from that promotion, or whether that promotion is causing loss to the business, causing loss of top line, causing loss of margin. And so you can react much more quickly to imperfect promotions. And that's just one example of the things we do. In an e-com environment, credit cards are critical, right? And of course, there's no card, nobody's running actual cards. We're adopting more digital payments. We're adopting more things like buy now, pay later systems. But there's lots of ways to exploit in an e-com environment cards, right? Users
Yes.
can acquire a batch of
Digital wallets, Google Pay, Apple
You
Pay,
can
everything else.
acquire a batch of stolen cards. You can create new personas. You can open accounts, take advantage of these promotional first offers with discounts, and do that over and over again. We have companies that are in the shoe business. That Nike, for example, is a highly collected set of products, and it's a product that's often stolen, whether it's in a e-com format or a bricks and mortar format. And so people will specifically target them. They'll set up an account and get credit or points for frequent buyers, and then use that to buy more material. And then next week, that down at the flea market, they're selling Nike shoes that they've gotten over a website. So it is a huge arms race that it absolutely never ends. Returns in e-com is absolutely huge.
Oh, yeah.
Today, and companies are starting to tighten up on this, right? We had a world of no problem returns. No cost,
Free
free
return.
returns,
No
no
question.
questions asked. And it's actually relatively easy to exploit that kind of situation. I can use these same multiple accounts to order the same product from lots of different places. I can claim, first of all, that I never got it, and I want a credit. when in fact I did receive it. There's not, oftentimes not a way of verifying that, although again, some of the third-party delivering companies and even Amex and not Amex, FedEx, sorry, FedEx and people are now they're taking pictures when they are delivering and they're showing it on the porch so that they can go back and say, no, we have a picture of where the delivery person left this, so we can verify that it was at your site. Now, I could still say it wasn't. I wasn't there when I got home, so somebody must have come along and taken it. I still need a refund. So there's ways, huge ways of exploiting that. And again, they end up with a no cost item that they can then go sell in the aftermarket or the secondary market. It's just increasingly a problem. And that's why you're seeing companies tighten down on return policies and tighten down on chargebacks. And even the credit card companies have shifted the burden of that from the credit card company to the retailer, right? It used to be that a lot of this loss would be absorbed by the credit card companies. But with the advent of digital identification, digital chips, those kinds of things, verifications, and they've shifted that now to the retailer. And they've said, okay, it's your website that wasn't operating correctly, or your cashier in the store that didn't do what they were supposed to do. So that one's on you, and we're going to charge you back, and we're going to take a fee out of it just for our trouble. So that's what banks are doing today. And it's not all bad guys, right? It's not all somebody with a hoodie on, right? That's this perception that they're single operators. There are large organizations, large gangs of people doing return fraud. There are in other countries, mostly there are these rooms of people filled with fraudsters that are working off of a script of how to material and never pay for it, or to take it, have it delivered, and claim it never got there, and those kinds of things. It's really a fascinating thing to look at. I find it anyway.
Well, as you rightly point out, I think that there are so many cracks for inventory, items, profitability to slip through that the vectors are almost limitless for the areas where you have to insert yourself into that transactional layer of the business. And I guess once you have or I assume that once you have the inventory values from the DCs, you have the inventory values of the physical locations, then you have the transactional data across all the transactional endpoints. If at any point those numbers start to not make sense and you cannot follow a through line from a major DC to a sales location to an actual transaction, when you can no longer link those together in a meaningful way over time, then that would indicate there's a problem somewhere.
Absolutely, all the time. It happens all the time. That is the definition of shrink, right? The definition of shrink is a delta between the value of the inventory when it's received by the company in the data set, in the distribution center or at the store, and what you got for it in retail. And the item count and the dollar amount, the delta between those two things is shrink. And this is not, by the way, anything unusual. This has been going on since day one, since the first retail operation was set up a long time ago. Stuff disappears, and it disappears for all kinds of different reasons. And there's a lot of legitimate shrink out there as well. Product gets damaged.
Damaged
Exactly.
product. And
you look in the supermarket business, there's shrink is built into the fresh foods,
margins.
the fresh foods and the vegetables and fruits and those kinds of things. A certain amount of that is going to go wrong. So over time you can develop ratios and you can develop an understanding of what's normal and what's not normal. And so you're looking for variations from the normal. But that's the easy part, I think, is identifying that you have shrink. The question is,
yes,
where are the holes in the sieve? Where are the holes in the bucket? And how do you go out? And so you mentioned a lot of things. There are sensors now, and we have a lot of our customers use video. They have video over key points in the operation, whether that could be the receiving door, it could be the over the cashiers. Doesn't really translate into e-com because there's no cameras in e-com, but
that's usually being distributed by a DC.
Is absolutely no question about it. No question about it. So there are cameras there, that's for sure. And as I already mentioned, there's cameras on the delivery side, the delivery person taking the picture. The key to this is to try to find where the holes are, especially the bigger holes, and then to close the holes, right? And so there's the identification part of it, and then there's the resolution part of it. And it's understanding what's happening allows you then to change your processes, change your tactics, and close the holes that are causing the the leaks. And tomorrow another leak is going to spring, so you need to be on that as well. Many of our customers, they experience in the first 6 months or so an amazing amount of identification of problems. And then some of them come back and they say, "Oh, our cases are dropping down. You're not finding as much anymore." And I say, "Congratulations. The new things that we're doing for you is helping you reduce the risk that you've got." And some of them go, "Well, yeah, but we need cases." And I said, "All right, let's expand. Let's do some other things. Let's try to look at other parts of the business. I think we'll find things there as well." But even those that think that they're okay, if they stop doing it, it's not long before the curve starts going back up again, and they end up back in the same kind of situation where material is going away on a wholesale basis, and customers, or both customers who maybe have a desire to get a little bit extra advantage, or fraudsters whose business it is to steal from you, are back in the game and back making money on your back and on your nickel.
This definitely brings the saying to mind: trust but trust but
Absolutely.
verify, trust but validate, right? And if you're not doing the verify and validate piece, then it's awfully difficult to have any faith or confidence or trust in your data. It's awfully difficult to have a trust in your teams, your staff. I know that even back in my retail days many years ago, there were situations where things were leaving literally by the back door of the retail store. They were putting stuff out there that was or they would mark something as damaged and disposed of, but they were putting it outside the back door in a box, and their friends would drive by and pick
Pick
up
it
the
up.
box of goods. And
Yep.
so there are so many clever, and I use that term in quotes, clever ways that people are stealing from these businesses, and they're coming up with new ideas and new ways all the time. And as a result of that, if you are not vigilant, and if you don't have some sort of a formalized system and process to monitor for shrink and identify anomalies in your supply chain from the point of distribution to the point of getting an item into the customer's hands, you are probably going to be the mark. If you don't think you're the mark, you probably are the mark. Because the reality is that for a lot of these businesses, for fraudsters, they know which, for example, I know we had this in our business when I was running e-commerce operations inside of a merchant. We knew that when we implemented a new loyalty program, for example, we had to do a tremendous amount of testing because we were omni-channel. We had physical and online. We had to do a tremendous amount of testing in the integration between ERP, commerce, and point of sale system, so that when people return, let's say they bought online, they got their loyalty rewards, then they returned it in store. Now, when that comes back in store, that has to be integrated with ERP so that we can then decrement the loyalty points or dollars that they got on the initial purchase. Otherwise, you instantly become a mark, because if you don't then refund as part of the refund process, if you don't collect back the loyalty points or the store credit or whatever it may be, then all of a sudden those people are getting a reward that they shouldn't have gotten. And so these are the types of things that I think a lot of businesses, they don't think through all the 1,001 vectors that people can take advantage of the system and process they have in place for purchasing, returning, getting a credit, getting a refund, loyalty points. Even where it's a paid loyalty program, people can take advantage of paid programs as well, membership
Oh,
programs.
absolutely.
And so if you create a hole, if you create a gap, even unknowingly create a gap, fraudsters will find that gap and they will exploit it 100% of the time.
They absolutely will. And just to take that onto steroids, you got to be worried about employees doing that, right? So if I'm a
Yes.
user, I can do that, and I can get my points and I can return the product. But if I'm an administrator or a shipping person inside of a website or a cashier in a store, and I notice that someone buying isn't using their loyalty card or isn't getting their account credited for the points that are associated with that, why not bring it to me? Why don't I just put my number in there and I'll get the credits? And that can be quite large, really quite large. You mentioned the supply chain a couple of times. Truckloads of stuff disappear, right? You have to track trucks full of things. I was hearing recently about a company that manufactured some clothing in Mexico, and they're a relatively small company. They're trying to beat the tariffs, and they decided to accelerate a purchase. Now, they don't run their own trucks. They outsource that to a trucking company or a third party logistics person. Well, let's call it a logistics person. Logistics person in turn hires trucking companies. Well, in this particular example, the trucking companies were fake. They were fake trucking companies. And so the trucking companies picked up the load, brought it over the border, and then disappeared. And that you couldn't find them anymore. They were gone. And the logistics company ended up holding the bag on that. Another thing that you mentioned that I wanted to come back to is this issue of putting systems in and validating and verifying, trust but verify. It's a really dicey and tough situation for most retailers to balance how much verification you're going to do versus how much ease of use you have on your website. So if I have an extremely difficult process, then I'm going to do less revenue because people don't want to go through the third party validation. They don't want to have to be putting in codes or receiving an email to click on a link and those kinds of things. That'll drive down revenues. On the other hand, if you have too much of an open purchasing process, then you're going to increase your losses significantly. So it is a constant challenge for retailers to strike that balance between ease of use and verification, and one that isn't solved today, by the way. I think companies have a wide array of experiences with various levels of security coupled with ease of use. And it's a problem. It's a problem that we work with pretty much every day.
And do you find that when you first start going in and you quantify the rate or the percentage of existing shrink in the business or historic shrink, and you say, well, you've had a historic rate of shrink of 3% or 5% or whatever it is,
Yep.
heaven forbid it's in double digits, but because it puts these businesses out of business if they get super high shrink rates. But do you find that sometimes your recommendation might be not just, okay, here's some of the digital things we can put into place to identify and track this and plug the hole in the ship, so to speak. But is it sometimes something as simple as, oh, you don't have a security guard at your doors? Just the simple act of putting a security guard at your door, the exit door to your shop, can sometimes make that the relative cost of having a security guard every hour that you are open at the door is vastly outweighed by the minimization of people walking out the door with stuff they shouldn't have. There's obviously digital ways to address this, but there also has to be physical security in some instances that goes beyond just having cameras over doors.
Oh, absolutely. Just physical is locks, cameras, access points, RFID. You mentioned, I think RFID. I completely agree with what you were saying about RFID. And about RFID now has gotten to the point where it's built into the label. Matter of fact, the label isn't even a label anymore. The label is embedded.
There's an RFID tag itself.
But it's embedded right in the fabric, right? It's not even a
Yes.
separate piece of fabric. And it starts at the point of manufacture, and it has everything that you need to know about that product, with the color, the size, the sewing batch, and that offers you all kinds of additional information about things. But back to your point about security guards. So one of the best examples here, they're not really thought of as security guards, but when you leave a Costco, there's
Yes.
somebody, and Best Buy does
They
a
scan
little
it.
bit too, right? But they're taking your receipt and they're doing a quick view of what you've got. I think they have very good controls. On the other hand, you can really overspend on security guards, right? So security guard companies want you to have a security guard in every store. But if you're just standing
Yes.
there and your effectiveness is based just on the way you look and your presence, that we find that to be not that effective, because stuff is happening at the point of sale. And
Yes.
that big burly guy standing by the door, he's more interested in tackling people in parking lots than in identifying a digital fraud or fraud that is happening in the numbers, or loyalty fraud and
Yes.
those kinds of things. We're not huge. Of course, we don't want security guards, because then you need less software. But and we're in the business of selling software. But we believe that for the most part, we can do a lot of things better than having a uninvolved security guard. And I'm not talking about the Costco scenario. I think the
Yeah.
Costco scenario is a good one because they're actually doing something, right? They funnel everybody
Yes.
out through the same door. You go there, you do a rough count of what you got. They're going to identify.
Well, our Costco here, they actually literally have a barcode scanner. They scan one, first of all, they scan the receipt, then they scan at least one item in the cart to make sure that it's basically just a spot
Right.
check to make sure that receipt relates to what's in the
Right, and
cart.
usually they
And
look at high value items because the high value items are the ones that are
100%
more likely to be the ones that people want to game them on, game
steal.
them on. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And now Costco is scanning your ID card coming in the door as well, so keeping
Yes.
track, and not just looking at it, they're doing those kinds of things. And again, it's part of the arms race, right? It continues to escalate in this.
But the funny thing you point out, I think you make a very good point here. And I think this is something that many retailers could learn a thing or two from. The Costco methodology, their flywheel of security, it never feels intrusive. It
Right.
never feels like I'm there. I never feel like there's this assumption that I'm ripping them off. I never feel like there's this assumption I'm guilty until proven innocent. I never feel like I'm being intruded upon. I feel like actually it's funny because even when I scan to go into the store, I feel like good because I don't want people that haven't paid for a membership to be able
Absolutely.
to get in to be able
That's
to
just
get
a
in.
fraud. That's just another way of losing money, right? If you have somebody trading, it's if you're trading cards around, it's kind of like the Netflix made it okay to
Yes,
stop people sharing logon identification numbers.
logins. Yeah.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with you. The Costco model is one, they're friendly people. It's just part of the process. It's a membership club, right? Like you say, if I don't want a non-member taking advantage of the things that I'm benefiting from, and I'm paying an annual fee to get my credentials and to part of the
Yes.
team, right?
Exactly, and I think many businesses could learn a thing or two from that. What and I know this is probably industry, vertical, region, and market specific, but what is but maybe you could just say take fashion retail, for
Yeah.
example. What are, like, the average like, what are shrinkage rates that are acceptable in some of these industries? And then what, like, within the, say, first 6 months or 12 months of working with you, what on average would you say, do you decrease shrink by 25%? Do you decrease shrink by 50%? What are some of the results that you're actually seeing in market once these businesses embrace your technology and embrace your process deeply in the
So it
business?
depends on the segment of the industry. Obviously, we mentioned earlier that if you're in the supermarket business and you're selling fresh produce and those kinds of things, you're going to have a higher expectation, and that might be in the 5 or 6% would be an acceptable number. On the apparel business, I think an acceptable number is probably 1.5 to 2%. I think there people would be very happy with that, and that's more of a target. I'm not going to say that's the average. I'm just saying that would be the targeted number that people would want. Actual experience is quite varied. And if you're a luxury retailer, it's an even different kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
These are big dollar items. Each one of them has a significant impact. So, in terms of what the standards are, it depends on what type of retailer you are, what type of apparel, if you're in the apparel business, what type of apparel person are. If you're a Zara or an H&M, which is fast retailing with
Fast
fast
fashion, yeah.
fashion, they're building stuff and getting it into the stores on a weekly basis. That's one thing. But if you're Hermes or Richemont
LVMH or
or
whatever.
Montclair or those kinds of companies, it's a completely different scenario. Actually, they're less worried about customers and more worried about their own salespeople gaming
Yes.
commissions, right? Because
Yes.
they're claiming that
Making
that they should
sales.
be paid a commission for things other than that. But back to your question, customers typically see, first of all, a payback on our product is usually less than 2 months.
Wow.
They find enough stuff to come back and have a positive impact on their bottom line in less than 2 months. Typically, they're getting a 15x return on their investment. And it
Wow.
manifests itself differently in terms of percentage of shrink. It again gets back to the condition of the company, what they're selling, what segment they're in. But I think it's be reasonable to say that they can reduce their shrink outside of supermarkets in probably a 50% range, something like
Wow.
that.
Wow. That is substantial. That is absolutely substantial.
Yep.
So you're a true partner with these businesses. Now, what don't you do today that either you see a gap in the market that you would like to add as a feature or function to your platform, or that your customers are asking you to do today that you don't yet do that you say, hey, look, we don't do this today, but 6, 12, 18 months from now, we will be. Is there anything on the horizon that is really important to you guys?
Yes, for sure. There is a company that's doing what I'm about to say, and it's an area that we don't do today. So, this is related to organized retail crime. And if you're familiar with organized retail crime and what that means,
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
You got these syndicates,
you
right?
got the teams of people working together. They're large crime organizations. They have a model that they're operating under. They want to steal certain things like health and beauty aids, for example. They will work a geography. They'll get on a highway and work their way down exit to exit, and they'll target particular brands and they'll target particular items within that brand, things that they know that they can move very quickly through their fences and their other distribution channels, which is a lot of times in flea markets and bodegas and that kind of stuff.
And online marketplaces too.
And online market, but even more. Yeah, exactly. I know that might even be the biggest one. But what we want to be able to do is to start gathering patterns of these individuals and then creating an environment where we can share that information across multiple retailers with law enforcement. Create an environment where we understand the MO, certainly the modus operandi, but very often also the individuals. If they're apprehended, a lot of times today, if you're apprehended in one location, you're not going to get prosecuted for the most part.
No.
Not because the retailer finds it to be too much of a hassle. They don't want their
Yep. And
people
cost.
intervening because that can cause even more problems. Somebody who's a real criminal is not going to think twice about whacking you over the head as they're running out the door with their bag of stolen items. So,
Or stabbing you
or
or
stabbing you,
anything
whatever it
else.
might be. So retailers don't want their associates doing those kinds of things, but they want to try to notice what are these individuals? Who are they? What were they dressed like? Were they men? Were they women? Are they tall? Are they short? Did they get into a car? Did the car have a license plate number? What color was the car? And if you can start gathering this data together, you can start focusing in. Law enforcement can use that to start focusing in on people that are serial people that are doing this over and over again. So instead of not arresting somebody who is caught once in the store, now I can find somebody that I can tie to multiple locations, multiple problems, and then that one I will arrest, and that one I will prosecute, and that one we will go after restitution on, and we'll potentially put them away. And so this whole area of a gathering, and the data can come in all different ways, right? It could be customers taking photographs of the car, customers taking photographs of the people. What happens now, anytime you see any kind of altercation or thing, I don't know if you've
You
experienced.
immediately get your phone out.
Yeah, everybody all around you. I was on a bus not too long ago when the person behind me was playing their phone out loud, and all I did was turn around and say, "Hey, can you shut that off or get a pair of headphones or whatever?" But immediately there were four people up taking photographs and taking video of me just talking to this person and trying.
Speaking to this
Right.
person.
So
Wow.
anyway, my point is that creates a record that can be aggregated, and with AI, we can start culling out those things and looking for common characteristics and isolating the video and pulling the video together and creating an identification process where you can understand who's doing what. And the key of this is getting all of the retailers to agree to share all this information across their corporate boundaries, right? So that everybody benefits from what everybody else has done, and law enforcement is brought in and can do that. So that's one area that I'm very interested in. We talked a lot about earlier about inventory and about all of the gaps and holes in the inventory process. That's another area that's of intense interest to me because there are so many opportunities for stuff to go missing at a lot of junction points as you work along, and there isn't a comprehensive solution out there. It's an aspirational thing for me to try to figure out how we can aggregate the data at each of these steps of the way, and then somehow find a way to plug those gaps, plug those holes that we identify. And then people management comes into it as well. Understanding one of the things that happens a lot is that the newbie in any environment, whether it's e-com or bricks and mortar, oftentimes they'll come in and be educated by the veterans about these are the rules, but here's what really works. Here's what really happens. And they'll end up training them on how to become a silent partner. I'll use the word silent partner in the business.
Yes.
And so understanding and helping task management at the frontline operation, that's another area that I have great interest in.
Wow. Super exciting stuff. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, it's been a fascinating conversation. You've schooled me and enlightened me on an area that I am far from being an expert in. Super interesting stuff. I love this. I absolutely love this stuff and how tech can help businesses be more efficient and minimize shrinkage to the best degree possible, because look, we want retailers to be successful out there, and especially the good ones.
Right.
What is the best way to get a hold of you? I will drop a link to your LinkedIn profile and to the Agilence website into the show notes. But other than that, how do you like people to reach out and get a hold of you about all things shrinkage management?
Well, you can get to my team through our website, which is agilenceinc.com. But me directly would be R Hawkins, Hawkins. It's Russ Hawkins, R Hawkins at agilenceinc.com. And I encourage your audience to drop me a line and let's have a conversation.
I love it. I love it. Now, I've been starting to ask this question of guests most recently. If you could change one thing about our industry, or your industry specifically, by just snapping your fingers, and you could change one thing about the industry, what would that be?
One thing about retailing or one thing about loss prevention?
It's your
I'm a
choice.
big.
You take this however you
I
like.
mean, we talked about it a couple of times. RFID is all over the place and has been around for a long time, right? And it used to be big clunky things that were
Tags
tags
that had to
and
be.
put. Now it's down to, as we've already noted, you can't see it, you don't even know you have it. I would like to see more of that be deployed across the industry. And we're working with a number of the companies that are doing those kinds of things. And I think that will have, as you said earlier, that you thought it already would have the benefit. It's got to be everywhere. And so I think if we could proliferate that and change that immediately, I might be putting myself out of a little bit of a job, but I would find other ways to manage data, right? Our data management capabilities isn't just about loss prevention. We find
Of
all
course.
kinds of other
Of
areas.
course.
I think I like the concept of total retail loss, which
Yes.
starts with what products are you selling and what are your promotions and what are people doing and
What
how.
prices are you selling at, and what margins are you selling at? All
Exactly,
that.
exactly. So it's good.
I love it. I love it. Listen, now is the point at our conversation where I get to flip the script. I get to turn the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question, any question you like. It can be personal or professional. Mr. Russ Hawkins from Agilence, what is your question for me today?
I'm very interested in your business. Are you a consultant? Is that what you're primarily doing? I know you're a speaker, and maybe we'll have you as a speaker sometime soon if you're open to that.
I would love it. I do a lot of speaking. I've spoken at, I think, 5 events so far this year, and I'm speaking at 2 more before the year's end in November. So, yeah, do a lot of public speaking, try to create as much content that's helpful to the industry as possible. Been working in the e-commerce space for 25 years, but for the last 5 years, I've had my own independent consultancy working specifically in the B2B e-commerce space. So for manufacturers,
Yep,
distributors, and
excellent.
wholesalers. And but I also work with SIs and agencies. I also work with platform vendors, and I also work with investors, but all focused on B2B. So all working with manufacturers and distributors. And so that has been a really good time. I've run and built agencies before. I've had my own e-commerce pure play before, worked inside brands, but now I absolutely love working with manufacturers and distributors to help them do and be better from a digital commerce perspective. And I work with them across their full stack. It's not just the e-commerce piece, it's ERP, CRM, CDP, PIM, WMS, OMS, IMS, PAWS, system integration. And I'm a little bit unique in that I work across people, process, tech, and data. Those are all 4 key pillars of what I work across and consult to with my clients. And so it's a very fun space. And what I find now that I've really doubled and tripled down on B2B is that there is so much more greenfields opportunity in digital commerce with B2Bs than there is in B2C. B2C and D2C, something like 98% of retailers offer e-commerce today. Depending on category and vertical, only about 40 to 60% of B2Bs offer e-commerce today. Now, they might offer EDI, they might offer punch
Sure.
out, but in terms of self-service e-commerce portal experience, still a huge percentage of B2Bs just do not do e-commerce today. And that to me is the most exciting thing, because we're growing off of a very small base, but we're growing the CAGR of commerce deployments in the B2B world is like 8 to 10 times what it is in retail.
Sure.
And what I found in retail when I was working primarily in retail e-commerce years ago is the fact that most of those projects working in that space, they are replatforming projects. So you're trying to unseat an incumbent. Whereas in the B2B world, because the B2B e-commerce space is so much more immature still than the retail e-commerce space, there's just so much opportunity here, and it's so much fun.
Better to pick a small but growing segment than a mature and crowded one. Very good.
Blue ocean versus red ocean. I'll take blue every
There you
day.
go. There you go.
I love it, my
Congratulations.
friend. Thank you so much for your time. It's been so much fun, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Thank
Well,
you.
Jason, thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it as well.
Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.